Welcome to Boston Public Radio. He is Jim Browdy. I'm Marjorie Egan. We're taping live tonight at the Boston Public Library for a special BPR program with a live audience here at the Boston Public Library. So glad everybody came out tonight. We're also going to have some live music a couple of times throughout the night from the amazing Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensembles.
So we also have light refreshments, as a lot of you have seen, beer and wine, although we forgot when we set this event up that our main guest is not a fan of beer. Here she is on our show back in August of 2018.
If I'm being fully transparent here, I actually don't drink beer. I'm much more of a Scotch girl. So
we're talking
McClellan
Pressley,
18,
Scotch
top
girl,
shelf,
apparently.
double barrel glass.
So we aim to please here at Boston Public Radio. Sadly, we could not afford McAllen 18. We did the best we could. So here it is, McAllen 12 for the Congresswoman. Zoe Matthews, thank you very much for the service. With us now, needless to say, is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She represents Massachusetts' 7th Congressional District and is the #2 most influential Bostonian, according to Boston Magazine. Congresswoman, it is great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Congresswoman, for being with us. And I hope you can take a sip or two and enjoy that wonderful, very fancy, what's that, one of those first edition, what do they call that, the single malt? Single malt, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
She looks happy, so I guess that...
I'm grateful, yeah.
So let's start right in with the news. You've been on a tour, of 20-state tour with Senator Markey and Senator Warren, talking about the Supreme Court ethics dilemma. What's the dilemma about, and what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, the dilemma is that there is not, for the highest court in the land, which in this moment I believe its legitimacy has been considerably undermined, both in that they are consistently overturning the majority will of the people. They are far right, extremist, imbalanced. And we have to restore fairness, integrity, and legitimacy. No one should be able to be influenced. And certainly the recent reports regarding Clarence Thomas, I think, make that case. And I'm grateful to Senator Warren, who's introduced legislation specifically around ethical standards. And then Senator Markey and I have introduced legislation to expand the courts, which sounds perhaps to some radical, but there is precedence for this. It's been done 6 times before. So.
Senator Markey thinks that Clarence Thomas should resign. I think Governor Healy does too. What do you think?
I co-sign that.
Okay.
You know, Congresswoman,
but I had issues with him long before now, so just to be clear.
Way back to the New
Yes.
Hill hearings? Okay.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people can agree on that.
You know, one of the things we often go back and forth on when you're here is wonderful legislative solutions that at least I, as a voter, not a member of Congress, think don't have a snowball's chance in hell. You have a very different attitude about this thing. Expansion of the court is, as you say, not that unusual, but I can't see it getting 60 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House. It clearly would not get. Same, we had Senator Whitehouse here the other day, who obviously is pushing big time for ethics reform. Does any of this stuff have a chance of getting a majority and getting to the president's desk?
Well, as you and I have discussed on a number of occasions, Jim, I do have an optimism bias. But also, you know, right now, I see so many policies that are a part of the national discourse and that are meeting the moment and that are, you know, moving, if not federally, on the municipal level and state level, things that people saw as very fringe. On the federal level, if I were to look at the executive action of student debt cancellation, people didn't think, you know, that had a chance or the president would ever respond to this coalition of multi-generational and racial coalition burdened by this nearly $2 trillion crisis from every walk of life. And he did act. I was in Cambridge earlier today announcing a pilot program building upon the success of the city of Cambridge's universal basic income program, which was, again, something that was considered very fringe, but is proven. And they used federal dollars that we delivered to pilot that, and it's been very impactful when you see us passing things like fair share, taxing.
The millionaire's tax.
Yes,
here,
the
yeah.
millionaire's tax. So I have an optimism bias, but I also have a strength of conviction. I have the intestinal fortitude, and I believe in the power of movements. And so the reason why we launched this bus tour, this Just Majority tour, in coalition with some of our siblings in the movement of justice, who represent the organizations of some of the most marginalized in this moment. Because when you look at what's happening with bodily autonomy and reproductive rights and those attacks on women's health care, it's all connected, right? The attacks on the trans community or on gender affirming care, the attacks on voter suppression and anti-Black rhetoric and policies. It's really all interconnected. And so we've come together in coalition to demand that the highest court of the land be just. And it has been really operating in the absence of justice and doing the work of obstructing justice on voting rights, housing rights, and reproductive rights.
A couple more things on the Supreme Court. One thing you left off your list, which you usually regale us with about what people thought was impossible. There were a couple of fools in Massachusetts who a couple of years ago thought that Capuano was going to crush you.
Oh, no, that was just you, Jim.
Exactly. Well, it may have been, well, maybe it was me. I don't know if it was just me. No, but,
No, I'm kidding.
well, no, it's not kidding. I am one of the
He
people
was
who
one
thought
of
you're
them.
going to get crushed.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
But, the Supreme Court thing, just staying on it for a second, and maybe it doesn't lead to anything. Trump was wise enough to pick people who are now in their young 50s. And if history is a guide, they could serve through potentially 8 presidencies. These Coney, Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch. There seems to me, again, as an outsider, that there's not a sense of urgency. There's you, there's Warren, there's Markey, there's White House. But there isn't this, Biden's not talking about this all the time, and he's got a pretty powerful bully pulpit. So despite your optimism, it doesn't seem like reform is going to be visited on these men and women anytime soon.
Well, first, let's be realistic about the legislative process. It is very rare that, your first bite at the apple, that you're able to move a bill. You are slowly building consensus and coalition. Yeah. And, and there's a lot of talk about perhaps term limits or reducing the power of the courts. Again, these are lifetime appointments. And although they're not elected by us, there should be the highest ethical standard for the highest court of the land and ultimately some accountability, because they should not be partisan. What's been happening with the Supreme Court, and unprecedented has truly been the word du jour for the last 4 years, but it is unprecedented. They have been legislating from the bench. So,
well, one of the things I think it would be interesting politically is that I think a lot of Republicans who are against abortion now have seen the blowback, and they've seen these votes in places like Wisconsin and in Kansas and Kentucky, where people have gone to the polls and said,
I'm so glad you raised that.
Yeah, okay, well,
Yeah,
I wonder whether the fear of certain Republicans, even though we saw Ron DeSantis just push this 6-week abortion bill down in Florida, but the fear of losing elections over abortion rights might at least change the politics.
Well, look, you invited me, so I'm going to be partisan. I mean, so let me just say this. I mean, Democrats have 2 years to make the affirmative case in the House to get the gavel back, and of course to keep the White House as well in 2024. And our argument certainly can't be that we're not them. But I would say that they strengthen our hand because you use the word fear. That is central to everything that they do. Yeah. The chaos and the confusion and the fear-mongering and the hateful policies and legislating. I mean, are you kidding me? Everything going on in this country, everything that our families are dealing with, and still recovering not only economically from the pandemic, but psychologically. The layered crisis that we're managing, the attacks on our civil rights and civil liberties, bodily autonomy, all these things are being threatened. And what they're putting forward are forced birthing bills and legislation that I would consider child abuse when you're talking about attacking trans children. I mean, even the Utah governor had sense enough to say, listen, there's 4,000 student athletes, right? High school athletes. And then I think 4 of them were girls. It's like one trans girl. One trans girl, right? So anyway, so they use hate in everything. They fearmonger, they legislate hate, and from the lower courts all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's what's so dangerous about this. They have become accomplices. They have become co-conspirators, proxies for this extremist MAGA agenda. And again, because only Democrats are asked, are you willing to be bipartisan? Look, I'm willing to sit at the table and work with anybody in the name of progress. My Post-Disaster Mental Health Act bill, signed into law by President Biden, had more Republican co-sponsors than Democratic co-sponsors. I'll sit at the table and work with anyone in the name of progress. But they have proven themselves over and over again that they govern with chaos and confusion. That isn't a residual effect. That's your strategy. That's how they started this 118th Congress with 14 ballots to elect their speaker, and the deciding vote was George Santos. So if that doesn't tell you something, about the ineptness,
yes.
They are active in sowing hate and division and misinformation, and they do a disservice to the American people because they're governing from a place of contempt and callousness and cluelessness instead of compassion and responsiveness.
If people don't know George Santos, he is the congressman that's lied about every aspect of his life. And if you're going to lie about your sports prowess, I'm not sure you'd say that you were a volleyball champion. That would be the place that you necessarily go. But that's right.
I can't keep up.
You can't keep up because there's so many lies.
I can't keep up. There's a lot there. But
can I just say who we are? By the way, we are at Boston Public Library for Boston Public Radio After Hours. We're talking, obviously, to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. Thank you for leading the applause, Congressperson. And by the way, we should have made clear, while during the first segment, Marjorie and I have the privilege of asking questions here, when we come back after some music, you get to ask questions of the Congresswoman. What you do is you fill out a card, which I believe you have in front of you. You walk over to that woman, our colleague right there, Hannah, hand her the card, and unless your question is really a lunatic question, there is a very good chance, and maybe even then, there's a very good chance that you will get to speak to the Congresswoman directly yourself.
Jim, speaking of lunacy, I just have to take a moment.
It's one of my favorite topics.
Speaking of lunacy, as we're talking about bans on bodies, again, all of these, the violence, the oppression, the marginalization, the denials are intersectional, and in the midst of bans on books,
right.
And an erasure of history and looking to roll back representation, we have to give it up to the BPL and those in the library sciences here, and the entire team and staff here, from security to the coffee house folks, and to our librarians. Thank you for everything that you do.
Couldn't agree more. So you attempted, well, I don't know what you exactly did the other day. You went to the Senate, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, you're not a senator, you know that, correct?
Not yet. Not
okay.
Yet.
Okay, well, wow. Okay, let's get back to that.
No, Jim.
Excuse me, I didn't make the face. You made the face. Okay, Congresswoman, why'd you go to the Senate the other day?
Yeah. Jim brings out the crazy in me.
Thank you.
That's right.
All right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Too.
Thank you.
Okay. So I introduced legislation to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. It's been over 100. You all should be clapping on that because. And this is very simple. Equal rights under the law shall not be abridged or denied by the United States or any state on account of sex. For 100+ years, we have been fighting for gender equality to be enshrined in our Constitution. We're not reflected in the founding document of this country, despite all that we do to preserve this democracy, what we do on the ballot, at the ballot box, the contributions we've made to movements, to community, 100+ years. So my legislation would do away with the arbitrary deadline. So in 1972, it was passed, but with an arbitrary deadline for ratification. And so since that time, 80% of the countries in the globe have enshrined gender equality in their constitution. 35, it might be 38. Is 38? 38. Yeah, have met the ratification.
3/4 of the states have ratified.
3/4 of the states have ratified. And so the women of this country have done their job. Advocates and activists, the states have done their job, and Congress must do their job. And so I'm very encouraged by the vitality of this movement in this moment, especially from Gen Z. They're very involved in this. And so Senator Durbin, who's one of our partners in this, held a Senate hearing on the ERA. It was the first Senate hearing in 40 years. And then there was a vote in the Senate. And so we went there, myself and many of my colleagues, to look them in the face, to demand that they vote yes. And we lost narrowly, but I want to say it was very demoralizing to see Republicans in the Senate defiantly putting a thumbs down. I mean, they were just so defiant and indignant and proud to be putting a thumbs down as if they don't have mothers or women in their family or aren't raising daughters. Nothing should be controversial about this. When this passed in 1972, it was bipartisan.
Yeah.
What we should not be partisan about, common sense, gun control, voting rights, gender equalities. These things should not even be controversial. And Jim and Marjorie, there was debate the night before, equal time held. Not one Republican came. Not one. And so when we arrived at the chamber, Murkowski was ostensibly filibustering, talking to an empty chamber because they did not even deem this vote as worthy of debate.
A Republican from Alaska, for those who don't know.
And two Republicans did vote with us, Murkowski and Collins.
Can I ask you two more questions about this for a second?
Obviously.
Yes, women.
One, first, if the ERA were to be enshrined in the Constitution as the 28th Amendment, I think, what would that mean for the right to abortion in the United States, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's, it would give us sort of a legal, standard there, and maybe they wouldn't have moved so swiftly. It's about rights and protections, and it's also about justice. I mean, how ridiculous that 100+ years, and I do also want to say this, Congresswoman Jackie Speer was who was leading this fight in the House for many years, and when she retired, she came to me and said, I want you to take the mantle. And I appreciate that, and it was appropriate because Black women should be leading and centered in this movement because Black women and other marginalized groups, the LGBTQ community, stand to benefit the most. And so myself and Congresswoman Cori Bush out of St. Louis, together we have launched an ERA caucus, which also helps with momentum. And I do want to give it up to Leader Schumer. He has assured us there will be another vote. So we have, tremendous colleagues. We're closer than ever before. So see that, Jim? You wouldn't have thought I would have had a Senate hearing. You wouldn't have thought we would have gotten a vote. So we have to remain vigilant. I believe in the power of movements, and it has never disappointed me.
Okay, so one last thing about this.
Clap for movements, y'all. Don't let Jim get away with that.
Congresswoman Pressley is essentially our living applause sign here at the Boston Public Library. I am moderately obsessed with this ERA thing, and let me posit something to you that I'm pretty sure I'm right about. The archivist for the government has the power to publish the ERA as the 28th Amendment to the Constitution now, because 3/4 of the states, as you say, have ratified as the Constitution mandates. There was an Office of Legal Counsel memo during Donald Trump saying the archivist shall not do this. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, at least in my research, two things. One, has the power to rescind that memo. There's no question about that. And two, my decent amount of research, has the unilateral power tonight to order the archivist of the United States of America to publish the ERA today as the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. Shouldn't you be lobbying the president to do something that is a far simpler, more direct route, Congresswoman?
I mean, I think, there are many tools available, but the president did also put out a memo endorsing my legislation, which would do away with the arbitrary deadline. And so he did put out rather a press release the day of the Senate vote saying that he supported this approach. And it's just to do away with this arbitrary deadline. There should not be a deadline when it comes to gender equality.
Fair enough. We're talking to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
You know, before we went on there, we were talking about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You were at the White House Correspondents' Dinner sitting at the
Yes.
table with
Why aren't
people
you putting
from
my outfit up on the screen?
the Boston Globe.
Did anybody here see my fit?
I
Thank you.
did, actually.
Okay.
You want to describe it for those who missed it? What were you wearing?
Oh, well, I mean, they can Google it.
Okay, they can Google it.
But,
Okay.
What I will say is that I felt very humbled to be invited and to be there with my favorite plus one, my husband, Conan. And it was a great night. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, other than that I thought the president did great and his comedic timing was on point and he had the right balance of self-deprecation. He was very funny, as was Roy Wood. But, you know, here you are in a room with 2,600 people, elected officials, activists, influencers, luminaries, journalists, right? I really appreciated President Biden's acknowledgement of the role of black press and shouting out Ida B. Wells, and that we celebrated Gwen Ifill, you know, who has Boston roots here, beginning with the Boston Herald. But the takeaway for me for the night is that, you know, it's 2,600 people and it's very congested, and you'll see these random sort of lines of people waiting to talk to certain people. And the people that had the longest line at this Correspondents' Dinner, which again is another reason why I'm so optimistic and hopeful, Jim and Marjorie, were Representatives Justin Pearson and Justin Jones.
Oh, that's great.
My gosh.
They had
The Tennessee members of the House.
two members
That's
of the
great.
Tennessee Three. And
That's
I
great.
mean, Hollywood was waiting to talk to them, elected officials, journalists. And, you know, they have struck a resonant chord. You know, this generation is fed up. And they are tired of policies that have failed their communities, their families, and them. And they are ready to participate in civil disobedience and to be disruptive, whether it's on gun violence reform and protecting kids and not guns, whether it's on climate justice or racial justice, ending police brutality, supporting my legislation to end qualified immunity. They are demanding more.
And they're
of
still
us.
in their 20s, right? They are in their late 20s, both of those young
Well,
representatives.
imagine, I mean, so
Yeah,
let me just say this. Representative Justin Jones and Representative Justin Pearson, imagine that they have been democratically elected. They were unjustly ousted for breaking decorum. We want to talk about decorum in the wake of the massacre of kids. I mean, outrageous. And they were treated differently than their
The white woman.
their good colleague.
And she did say it was because
she
of the
did
color
say
of her
that
skin.
and allying this fight. But I want you to know that the attacks on them have not stopped. I mean, they were stripped of committees. And they raised $1 million in 3 days, and they have changed the campaign finance rules just with them, that none of that can be used towards their specials in their re-elections. So they'll establish a PAC, you know, that will work to advance the movement and the cause of common sense gun reform. But what happened to them is really an attack on black leadership. Elected leadership and representation that is happening in state legislators that are Republican-controlled throughout the country. And I do just want to shine a spotlight on that because they are not anomalies. This is a systemic backlash. And if I could be so bold as to say, to put black folks in their place. I mean, that's really what is happening in some of these state houses that are Republican controlled. And so I'm sorry that they had to experience something so dramatic to shine a light on that, but I'm working very closely with them. And in fact, Rep. Pearson has ties to Boston.
I know.
Union.
Doesn't he attend church on
Yes,
Zoom or
Union,
something? Yeah.
Union
Yeah.
Church in the South End is his home church.
And of course, one of the things that didn't make it into a lot of the stories the reason they were so frustrated and went up with the megaphones is because their microphones were
shut
shut
off.
off. So they're trying to argue about this massacre of these children, and they were silenced. And so they said, "Well, we've got to do something," and they were silenced. But I want
And also, I want to say something about their, these extraordinary black lawmakers. They are also incredibly humble. And in this, we were all concerned about them. We were concerned about their well-being. We were concerned about their safety. And what they were most concerned about was that their constituents were going to be disenfranchised. That's what they cared the most about. And so that's what gives me hope.
So I mentioned the White House Correspondents' Dinner because President Biden made a couple of jokes. Here we have some sound. He's been asked constantly about his age. So here he is talking about 92-year-old Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News and the Wall Street Journal and a lot of other news media organizations all around the world. This is President Biden on Rupert Murdoch at the White House Correspondents' Association dinner.
You might think I don't like Rupert Murdoch. That's simply not true. How could I dislike a guy who makes me look like Harry Styles? Call me old. I call it being seasoned.
So I just want to double check. You support President Biden's in his re-election efforts, and what about the age issue?
Oh, I think President Biden and Vice President Harris, they've made a compelling case. The legislation that they've been able to move is going to be transformative. I mean, everything from the American Rescue Plan, the CHIPS legislation, to bipartisan infrastructure bill, to the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, the child tax credit, although we need to make that permanent. I'm just a firm believer that ultimately I want people to support, well, again, I'm being partisan, Democrats, and to vote not because they read a press release and saw a story about what we're doing, but because they feel the impact tangibly in their lives all around. And that's as more of these monies are distributed and people really start to see them showing up in the infrastructure of this city, resulting in cleaner energy and so many other things. I think, again, the case has been made. They have my unequivocal support, and I look forward, as I did last time, to campaigning and working hard to make sure that they return to the White House and that we take the gavel back in the House. And we have 2 years to make the affirmative Democratic case. And I do want to take a moment just to say, because I was with our whip with Catherine Clark last night, it is extraordinary the diverse representation in House Democratic leadership right now. To have Hakeem Jeffries, as our leader, Catherine Clark as our whip, Massachusetts' own, and Pete Aguilar as the chair of our caucus is a very powerful statement and representative.
You're not concerned at all about having an 86-year-old president if he serves the full second term? Honestly.
Jim, how old are you? You're pretty sharp.
I'm pretty old. Pretty old. But you know what the difference is? I'm not running for president. You know what I mean?
Thank God.
I'm like somebody running for the Senate, if you know what I mean.
Let me say this.
Running for president?
I'm no. Look, I'm spoiled. I mean, I've cut my teeth in my early days in Congress under the tutelage of people like Maxine Waters and been proximate to Nancy Pelosi. And, these are women that are over 80, so, I have had a number of one-on-one conversations with him. We don't always agree. He also has a strength of conviction. And believe me, he's very lucid. He is very sharp. We would be well served by another 4 years.
Yeah, can I just I'm sorry to dwell on this. We'll do it one more minute, then we're going to take a break for some wonderful music. If he was running in front of a board of directors of a corporation at 80-something to be the CEO for 4 more years, my attitude would be, go get him. If he wants to, whatever that, this is the one job in the world that I would say, I assume you'd agree, the hardest job in the world, the most stress, the most...
Absolutely.
So is there not a piece of you, despite your... And by the way, I agree, his legislative accomplishments are stunning, considering the division in Congress. Is there not a piece of you that is concerned about the age he will be in the latter half of his second term? I mean, I'm sure there is.
Well, let me just say this. I'm asked all the time about my own weariness at the ripe old age of 49 in this work. And you know, I always tell people that I don't have the luxury of being cynical or being apathetic. I've been governing during some of the most consequential times. And he has been president during some of the most consequential times with the most unprecedented challenges in our lifetime. And he has met the moment. So I feel battle tested, and I know that our president and vice president are.
Fair enough.
We're talking with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who represents Massachusetts 7th District. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to bring up Michael Bradley from the Boston Arts Academy to introduce
Were you in for a
these
treat?
fantastic young kids, well, teenagers, young men and women, let's put it that way, who perform as part of the Spirituals Ensemble. You're listening to Boston Public Radio at the 89.7 GBH, taping live from the Boston Public Library for a special BPR After Hours. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're taping live at the Boston Public Library for BPR After Hours. Couple of housekeeping kinds of things. We just found some photograph of some woman at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Can we put that up? Wow. Oh, my God. Who is that woman? In any case, that's one. Two, we want to acknowledge somebody else here. The general manager for news at GBH. There she is, Pam Johnson, our boss who makes this all possible. And reminder again that the cards that are on your table, or Hannah has or something, I know some of you have filled them out. If you want to ask a question of the congressperson in the next segment, please give them to Hannah. We're going to sort through them. We'll get to as many as we can. We're obviously talking with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. And before we continue with that discussion with her and invite audience questions, you are going to hear some music that is otherworldly, literally and figuratively. Joining us on stage is Michael Bradley from the Boston Arts Academy. He's the director of their Spirituals Ensemble. Michael, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so
we are
much.
thrilled. We are thrilled to have you here. As we said to you before the show began, we saw these young men and women at the memorial for the great Mel King, who passed away just a few days ago, did such wonderful things for the city, and we were just besides ourselves. So we had to make sure we got you here today. So for people who don't know, tell us about the Boston Arts Academy, what it is.
Okay, awesome. Well, Boston Arts Academy was started in 1998. It was from a great call from parents in the community who wanted to have a public arts high school for the children that live and thrive in the city of Boston. So we they came together in 1998 and they started the school. We are now celebrating 25 years this year of being together, and in that time we have achieved amazing and awesome programming. We are a school that has 4 majors and 10 programs, maybe 11. We are adding constantly. We just added a new one that'll be starting this year called Media, Entertainment, and Production. And so we study dance, theater, music, and visual arts and design. Students from all over the city. We are the only public high school for the arts in the city of Boston, and we service just under 500 students in a brand new building that was given to us by the city of Boston, by our former mayor, and we are just really excited to be back in the Fenway area again. I have the awesome privilege of leading the music department with my colleague Greg Holt. It's just so awesome to be doing this work with these children, and one thing I can say is that our school is so unique because it's the only place, I think, where our children get to do 2 to 3 hours of art at a minimum every day. And I don't know if it's a good thing for them or a bad sometimes, because we do work really, really hard. They work really, really hard, which you're going to see some of that work today. And I think it's a blessing for me to be able to teach them. I learned from them, and I think all of our faculty and staff would say that we learn just as much from our students as they learn from us.
Congresswoman Pressley, we've heard from a fairly reliable source. You're a huge supporter of the school, no?
Yes, absolutely.
And what's the thing for you? What captures you?
Well, the students are gifted. They are committed.
Yeah.
And I think they brilliantly honor the legacy of Elma Lewis, an incredible arts educator for whom I believe is deserved a building named in her honor. I want to just say that. And also, I'm with a number of these young people and some of the incredible alum like Danny Rivera. I do believe in this sort of idea of art is political. It stokes the consciousness, it reflects the consciousness of the time. There would be no civil rights movement, which we are still very much in. If you think about Coretta Scott King studying at the New England Conservatory and singing the freedom songs of the movement, I think it just proves that everyone has a role to play. Some people are going to pick up a paintbrush. Some people will use their limbs. Some people will pick up a pen. Some people will spit a verse, or write a rhyme. We all have a role to play.
Weren't you a choir kid? Didn't I read that?
Well,
somewhere?
I grew up in the church.
Okay.
So yes, of course. But the other thing is that I love that. So not only, I think our young people often come into this world with creative and artistic gifts, and they're discouraged from cultivating and nurturing those gifts because people will tell them that ultimately you're not going to be able to make a career of that. And I just love that the Boston Arts Academy sets all of that on its heels and says, we see you, we're going to celebrate, cultivate, and nurture these gifts, and they are going on to make tremendous contributions in our city and our Commonwealth and our country. But I love it because art is political, and I also love that they are nurturing the arts at every level. Sometimes people are focused on song but not dance, and song and dance but not the performing arts. Yeah. They do it all.
So, Michael Bradley, tell us a little bit about the ensemble and how it came to be.
So the Spirituals was actually formed over 10 years ago by our now assistant head of schools, Tyrone Sutton. They are a group that was born out of the desire and need to keep the true essence of the foundation of American music alive. And that is the Negro spiritual. That is the slave song. That is the dirge that rose from the fields of our ancestors who were brought here in chains, but they somehow took that pain and turned it into something that's so full and rich of heritage that we can't escape it. It is literally inside of everything that we sing, say, and do as musicians, as artists. And I think it's really amazing because Congresswoman Pressley and all of the amazing politicians in our city, I've always had a deep connection. Mayor Wu has been a really big fan of us, and it's because I think we sing and speak to the soul of what it is to be a musician, what it is to be music. It is literally the personification of what is music. It is the basis of everything that we do. And I think it's so important that we don't lose that. And that's why I've also always fought for this group, to keep them alive and to push them out there, not so they can sing everywhere, but because this music matters. This voice matters. And this sound matters. And it's so important that we remember and appreciate this sound, and because it's something that can disappear. It's something that gets lost often because of how the curriculum is built in our schools. And so we really want to make sure that voice never gets lost.
I just want to say one thing. I walked into that celebration of Mel King's life. Marjorie knows this. I'm one of the least spiritual people who ever lived. I'm being honest. I left like a different human being.
That's right.
And it was because of these kids. I mean, it was so incredible. I know we're going to hear them in a second, but so...
You were doing hallelujahs on the way
Well,
out
I
of the
wouldn't go that
church,
far, but
it's
I was close.
unbelievable.
I was close.
You're good. But it is always stirring, and I love what you were saying there. It's an important reminder that it's in the tradition of sort of storytelling and griots and passing that on. It is something that we summoned. It's sort of ancestral in our resilience, but in telling our stories and preserving that tradition and our heritage.
Yes.
Thank you for making that point, especially when we find ourselves at a time when there are draconian forces at work that seek to erase the true telling of our history. This is that much more important in this moment, I think.
Okay, Michael, we're going to hear a song?
No, before
Okay.
we hear a song, can you just give us, and before you tell a song, just give us a picture of who these young people are? I mean,
So these are 10th, 11th, and 12th grade vocalists at the Boston Arts Academy. This is one of our 2 audition vocal groups that we have in our music department. They have sung this group in spirit, and not this particular iteration, I would say, but this group has sung everywhere. It's actually kind of a returning home because under Mr. Sutton's leadership, the spirituals actually won the Sing That Thing competition.
I know that at GVH, that's
so,
right.
So we're returning back to give a
That's
little
great.
bit back. But these students are vocalists. They study contemporary. They study classical music. They can sing in just about any language you want to throw at them: Italian, French, Spanish, English. They do all of the amazing things. We do background singing labs. They can sing a little Deborah Cox, "How Did You Get Here?" All right? But they can also sing Schubert for you. They can also sing Brahms. And I think that's one beautiful thing about this amazing school. And I always make sure to thank the people that made that happen. And that's the great people in our city and the continuous support of people like Mayor Michelle Wu, who have made sure that we have space in place because these children have access to so many amazing things. We're doing Carmen in a few weeks. They're preparing for a Springfest concert. They have so much they offer. And the fun thing is that a lot of them didn't really get a chance to have access to that before. And because of what BAA is, it gives them access and opportunity. Some of them are going to be going to Italy this summer. Some of them are going to be going to New York for different things like that. And it's because they're so talented.
Yes,
I literally
they are.
can throw anything at them.
Yes.
And they are hungry to sing, hungry to perform. So I want to stop talking so they can perform.
Okay,
what are they going to perform?
So this piece is called A Prayer. It's by British Black composer Ken Burton. It's from the words of poet Paul Laurence Dunbar, and it speaks to the turmoil and the difficulty and strain of life. And it represents a lot of what we talk about. It's the heritage of the African American people. It wasn't always pretty, but it was always real and honest. And this song really, I think, speaks even more so to what we're dealing with in today's world. And in our country in
That's
this
right.
moment. And it's really just a longing for rest, a longing for peace, a longing for repose from all that's going on in the world. So that's what they do.
Let's welcome Michael Bradley and the Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensemble.
BAA, let's
Michael.
go.
Arts Academy Spiritual Ensembles. We're going to hear from them again for later in the show. They're directed by Michael Bradley, and we're so grateful that they're here. I'm going to take a quick break. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, the special BPR edition. We are live at the Boston Public Library taping. Our guest is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. We'll be right back for more questions for the Congresswoman and more music from these wonderfully talented young people.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. You're listening to a special BPR After Hours taping of the show from the Boston Public Library. Our guest for the whole time here is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, representing the 7th Congressional District. We're going to hear more from the Spirituals Ensemble before we leave tonight, so do not leave, believe me. They are truly, it's
a spiritual experience.
Yes,
truly.
it was.
It is a
Thank you,
spiritual
Congresswoman.
experience.
I would
Yes,
agree with that.
correct.
Now, we're going to let people in the audience have a conversation with the Congresswoman about whatever is on their mind. Is Desi here in the audience? Where are you, Desi? Desi, do you want to come up to the mic? Desi is approaching the mic. She's about 10 feet from the mic, 5 feet from the mic. There you are. Desi, you're on with a congressperson. Hello.
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 With today's climate of injustice and hate, it's hard to turn on the news and consume media without feeling powerless to change the forces at hand. How do you stay hopeful, and what advice do you have for young people wanting to make a change?
I mean, as I was saying earlier, Desi, it's really, I'm not sure of your age, but it's really your generation that gives me a lot of hope because they don't have a malaise or detached acceptance in the face of injustice. Most of the young people who I'm proximate to are leading movements when it comes to racial justice, climate justice, and ultimately have proven themselves successful. The president ultimately acted on student debt cancellation by executive action because of the strength of this movement with a lot of young people who were championing issues-based activism from bodily autonomy and gender-affirming care, racial justice, climate justice, student debt cancellation. So, it's been my experience more often than not that government does not lead, it responds. And so it responds to pressure. It responds to movements and hold us accountable. I can understand how exhausting it can be given the layered crises that we're all navigating, but you are entitled to a future with clean water and breathable air and pursuing higher education and your dreams without being in permanent debt for the rest of your life. Being able to, if you want, to purchase a home in the community with which you were raised, to build wealth. You deserve a government and a world that meet you at your needs and your dreams. And so I know it can be dispiriting, but I will share this with you, and many people who know me know that I'm a sucker for a good affirmation. I'm no poet, but poetry is probably what I read the most, and so that is sort of a balm for a weary soul for me. I read a lot of Audre Lorde, a lot of Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, Maya Angelou, but I also like affirmations, and so an affirmation that has really been anchoring me the last 4 years is this: I choose the discipline of hope over the ease of cynicism, and I choose fortitude over fatalism. It's just a reminder that hope isn't something organic. It is a practice.
Desi, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Congresswoman, on Tessie's question, we read constantly about the mental health crisis among young people and the impact of social media. I know you have a teenager at home, and I know that other legislators are talking about restricting children's access to, whether it's after bedtime, to TikTok, Instagram, that kind of stuff. What advice can you give to parents that are dealing with young kids and some of the social media-induced crises of mental health?
Well, our daughter Cora is 14 years old, and I worry a lot about the impact of the pandemic on our young people, the traumas they were already carrying in their emotional backpacks heading into learning communities has been exacerbated, by the pandemic, the isolation, the rise in clinical depression, anxiety, suicide ideation. And I would say for girls in particular, the influence of social media that cultivates this culture of chasing likes and of constantly comparing your body and your life to other people's very curated, filtered representation in these feeds. It's worrisome. That being said, I've also seen the ways in which social media has created a space for community and representation and empathy to help combat some of that isolation and loneliness that we can face as adolescents, but has been heightened given so many other variables in our society. So our daughter probably thinks we're a little strict on social media, if I'm being honest. But
before Marjorie recognizes the second person from the audience, you mentioned in response to Desi's question the student loan forgiveness program that you and Senator Warren have probably been maybe the two highest profile advocates for. But we've discussed this before. If I can use a legal term, if the Supreme Court screws this program, what's Plan B? If they determine the president did not have executive authority to forgive $10,000 and $20,000 in student debt, what do you do?
Well, Jim, as an organizer, I certainly pride myself on making sure that there are always contingency plans. But in this instance, I think it's important that we not cede any ground or any defeat as of yet. And maybe not ever, because the legal case is sound. The Supreme Court just needs to uphold the law. President Biden has the authority, the same authority that was used, that we organized and pushed him to do a pause on student loan payments during the pandemic. He has the authority. Congress has given him the authority. And so the legal case is sound. The Supreme Court just needs to uphold the law. And in the same way that we fought for executive action, and then once he did pass that, again, this was going to impact 40 million plus people. This will, for 1 in 4 black borrowers, this will zero their debt out completely. If you're a Pell Grant recipient, we're talking about $20,000 worth of debt canceled. Non-Pell Grant recipients, $10,000. And I always call it relief or cancellation and not forgiveness, because borrowers have done nothing wrong. They are doing what we have told them to do in what is supposed to be a meritocracy, and education is supposed to be a great equalizer, but the cost of it has increased by 150%, putting that farther and farther out of reach. And so this is an issue of great consequence to people from every walk of life. Over 100,000 people in my district, in the Mass 7th alone, stand to benefit from this relief. And so we've been at the Supreme Court organizing, rallying to keep that pressure up. But the legal case is sound.
Let's go. Do you want to go back to the audience, Marjorie?
Yeah, we've got a question, I think, from one of our colleagues.
Oh.
It's Soraya Wintersmith from GBH News. Here she
Hello,
is.
Soraya.
Hello, Soraya.
I think this is cheating, Soraya, but we'll allow it anyway. Go ahead.
But I'm going to go ahead and take advantage because
Great.
we're here. Good evening, Congresswoman. I want to revisit the conversation about age and lucidity and your eyes on the Senate. Your sister in service
I said nothing
asserted
about
that California Democrat Dianne Feinstein should resign given her extended absence from the chamber as she recovers from shingles. She's quoted in CNN AOC as saying that it's causing harm to the Judiciary Committee. Where are you in that discussion, and are you thinking about term limits for your colleagues in the Senate as well?
We should identify the two people you're talking about. Her sister is Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, and the senator about whom you're speaking is obviously Dianne Feinstein from California.
Yeah. Well, certainly I wish the senator, who's a trailblazer in her own right and has ably and faithfully served in the Senate for many decades. I wish her well in her health and her recovery, but I do think that if it is impacting her ability to do the job, then I would support a resignation. Again, these are very consequential times. The numbers in the Senate are very slim. The work of the Judiciary Committee, just as one example, like all committees, is very important, but again, especially in this moment. So.
There you go. Any other of our co-workers who want to ask a question of the Congress? Okay, maybe not. I believe we have, is it Mehdi? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Mehdi, come on down. Welcome to the show, and you're speaking to the Congresswoman.
Hello, it's an honor. We started this conversation about almost the attack of civil rights on the Supreme Court level. And I work very closely at the intersection of arts and disability here in Boston.
Thank you.
So with discussions around the rights for people with disabilities on the docket this fall in the Supreme Court, we just read about it in an opinion piece on the Boston Globe. Can you speak to what conversations Congress is having right now to protect the ADA and disability rights and justice?
Well, first, thank you for what you do. And I do see all of these fights and issues as intersectional. And so I do seek to bring a disability justice lens to every policy that I advance and every vote that I cast. It's actually from the disability community that they directly shaped my practice of the people closest to the pain should be the closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making. I learned that from the disability community. And I would say with the disability community and the ADA, the same thing that I would say about women and reproductive rights in Roe. The ADA, to me, is really the floor. It's not the ceiling. And I think that, oftentimes that will be the only commitment to the disability community that elected officials will speak to when employment and housing discrimination is rampant, when there are policies in place that impact people's ability to get married, where many of our neighbors in the disability community and loved ones and family members are living below the poverty line. It's why I continue to fight also for home and community-based services. And I know that's a priority in the president's budget as well, so that people can maintain that independence depending on the kind of disability that they have. And I'm also a big advocate for those disabilities that are invisible. I want more of us, when we talk about racism and sexism, to also name ableism, because it is rampant and we are very casual in the practice of ableism in society every day. So I'll just say at this time, I'm not privy to any specific conversations that are happening, but that is certainly a community and a voice that I seek to represent in every room that I'm in. And I'm grateful to the disability community, which has also embraced me as someone living with the autoimmune disease alopecia totalis and the bullying and discrimination that I've experienced with that. So thank you for what you do every day and for your question.
Mehdi, thank you very much. for your question. Do you have another one, or do you want to?
I do have another one, but I want to make sure we have enough time.
Oh,
to
we'll
hear
have time
another-
for music. We have a
do
quick question and a
okay,
quick
question.
answer.
This is from Marisa, I believe. Is Marisa available to ask her question? Hi, Marisa.
Marisa
Thank you.
does not work with us. I want to be clear yet
Marisa,
again. Go ahead,
Marisa,
Marisa.
sorry.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. It's an honor. My question, I am a professional dancer and arts administrator in the city, and so we're very aware that the Mass Cultural Council has been active in advocating for a robust budget for the arts, including artists of color. You mentioned yourself that art is political, but so often we professionals can become entrenched in our own practice that we lose sight of our particular positionality in the larger landscape. So my question is, what role do you think the arts can and should play in the wider societal, cultural, and/or political conversation?
I think it should be integrated. In my time on the Boston City Council, briefly I chaired the committee on what was then called Arts, Film, Humanities, and Tourism. And I worked with the state legislature to establish several cultural districts in the city of Boston. I want the arts to be integrated in everything, both in our economy and our culture. But let me just say this. I think that we're selfish when it comes to the art. We want to benefit from artistic contributions, but we don't support the artist. And many artists are living below the poverty line. And so we need housing that is affordable for artists and their families, because people often treat artists like they are just solo in the world. And so if there are housing and work spaces or performance spaces that are affordable that they can live in, it's usually just for them. And not it doesn't see them outside of that. So I think art is integral to everything: our culture, our civic life, our politics, our economy. And I will say of my colleagues across the aisle, they have no appreciation for the arts. And in fact, I don't know. Then maybe they're a bunch of actors, bad ones. That's the appreciation they have. But through this most recent funding of community project funding, what used to be called earmarks, they banned a lot of the eligibility for artistic and cultural institutions. They don't see it as an imperative. They see it as, I don't even know if they see it as additive, but they definitely don't see it as mandatory. And I do in every way. That's why it's not STEM, it's STEAM. There's no innovation without the arts. Yeah. So.
In any case, thank you very much for your
thank
question.
you.
Speaking of arts, we have a little more art.
Yes.
Yes.
We're going to talk before they perform. We're going to speak to a couple of members of the chorus. Adamar Pierre, is that you?
Yes, that's me.
Hi, Adamar. How are you? Nice to see you. And I believe you're going to be joined by Derek Gomes. Where are you, Derek? Is that you?
Hi, yes.
Welcome to both of you. How are you?
Thank
Derek, are you Shrek?
Yes.
Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
You did Shrek, right?
Yeah, I play Shrek.
So what's the difference between singing Shrek and doing this thing?
It's very different because being Shrek and singing in a choir like spirituals, you definitely have different qualities of singing because Shrek was a musical, so you have to add acting and dancing and all those type of things into it. So it was very difficult trying to sing, act, and remember lines at the same time. And but it was a great experience, and having my spirituals background and putting that into Shrek to be able to sing and perform for others definitely helped a lot.
Can you give us 10 seconds of Shrek?
Okay. I picked this flower right over there. It's where it grew. But I don't really like it, but it made me think of you because it's pretty.
Derek Gomes.
Acapella, come on! Acapella!
So, Adamar, tell me, Adamar, thank you.
Hi, Adamar.
What does the choir mean to you? Why did you want to be in this choir?
Mainly why I wanted to be in this choir is because even before I came to the school, I was able to know some people who were in the spirituals choir or who are currently now alumni, and it always inspired me to want to be more of a singer because I grew up in the church singing. So when I came to BAA and I saw the different opportunities that we had to be singing and in school, out of school, it was very interesting to me, and it just boosted my love for art and singing as a whole.
Are you moved by, when you perform, Dirk, in this choir, are you as moved by it when you're doing it, as I was looking around the room when you were performing, as the people who are hearing you are?
Oh, 100%. I definitely, because music is just me. I'm everything music. And singing some of these songs like the prayer that we just sang, it sort of touches your heart. You have to feel it before the audience can feel it. You have to care for it first. And if you don't care for it, the audience won't care. And definitely singing this song, and all these songs and spirituals, definitely touch our soul in a spot that you've never felt before.
Jim, the Congresswoman has a question.
Oh,
I was just curious, maybe just by a show of hands, how many of you plan to pursue the arts in college or beyond, that you hope that this is what you'll do for a living? Wonderful.
whoa. We should say, since we're on radio, that was practically unanimous there,
unanimous.
Congressperson. Do you plan to pursue the arts, Adamar?
Yes, I do. I plan to either do musical production and like sound engineering for like music, and also maybe vocalist, like being a vocal major as well.
I'm so glad that you lifted up that aspect, because just like in doing media, or I would say even as an elected official, the folks behind the scenes, the production folks, don't always get the shout out. So let's give a shout out to production and all the folks behind the scenes here. But in the arts, that's wonderful.
So, Derek, what are you going to perform for us, you and your colleagues?
I got you. We're going to sing a song, Glory Hallelujah, to the Newborn King by Mark Butler.
Okay.
Great.
Wonderful. Michael Bradley's about to come out front again. Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensemble, led by Michael Bradley.
Let me tell you, he was born in a manger, born in Bethlehem, the Son of the Most High God.
And Jesus is his name.
Hallelujah.
Let me tell you, he's the King of all nations, Savior, the Lord of lords, and he reigns forever. And Jesus is his name.
Oh, glory, hallelujah. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Wonderful counselor, wonderful counselor, wonderful counselor, wonderful counselor, wonderful counselor, wonderful counselor, wonderful counselor. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory to the newborn King.
Please get on your feet for these young people. Oh my God.
Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensemble, directed by Michael Bradley. And not only are the voices great, but the arrangement, Michael, is beyond belief. That was spectacular. Thank you
Wow.
so much.
You know,
So
we should thank a couple of people, by the way. The reason we were fortunate enough to have them here, Lee Pelton, who's on the board of GBH and the head of the Boston Foundation,
Yes.
connected us with Ann Clark, head of school. Maura Tai, I believe, is here tonight, too. And want to thank all of them for making this happen. And everyone, you were
Yes.
fabulous. We cannot thank you enough.
And I want to say this,
My
electeds
God.
don't agree on everything, but Mayor Walsh, Mayor Janey, and Mayor Wu all agree on Boston
right.
Arts Academy.
That's right.
What an incredible return on investment, your greatness.
Greatness.
Thank you so much. Thank you for, and you know what actually I was reflecting on? I'm watching my district director over here, Eric White, and he grew up Catholic. And, you know, he worked with me in City Hall as well. And the first time I took him to Black Church, this was very akin to that experience.
Yes.
You know, so.
I think maybe the black churches do it a little bit better, and I'm a Catholic. Shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
So how about one more question from each of us before we let people have a little joy before they go home tonight?
Well, I just have one kind of serious question. You referred, Congresswoman, before to guns, and we talked about a survey today from Fox News, of all people, that said that over 80% of Americans, the numbers are phenomenal. They want background checks. They want waiting periods. They want ages raised. You can't be 18 and buy long weapons. They want red flag laws, all these things. So I just wondered, you talked about the impact of young people. You think about those Parkland kids that went to the mat to fight for a gun legislation. What do you think of the prospects with those kind of numbers?
Again, whether you're talking about bodily freedom, whether you're talking about gender equality in the Constitution, whether you're talking about voting rights, whether you're talking about the public health crisis that is gun violence. This is a rural issue. This is an urban issue. This is a suburban issue. This accounts for, it's the #1 killer, accidental killing of children in the home. Killing by way of domestic violence, suicide, community-based violence, and of course, school shootings. I mean, America, for all of its desire to be exceptional, this is not the way in which we want to be a pace setter for the globe. We are an anomaly. This tragic phenomenon does not occur anywhere else. And so, we have to do something, and you stole my talking points because those are all the things we want. Universal background checks, banning assault weapons and military grade weapons, increasing the age to purchase firearms from 18 to 21, red flag laws. I mean, we know what the common sense reforms are. We know what needs to happen, and it's just so sad that the NRA lobby and the influence of that on our colleagues across the aisle has them more committed to protecting guns than protecting our kids. So I want to say this as I think about my colleagues that came in so across the aisle so defiantly to vote down the ERA. Take notice. Take notice. And the electorate needs to put them on notice. When it comes to protecting our kids, when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to voting rights, again, they have proven themselves over and over again to be undemocratic, anti-woman, anti-worker, anti-immigrant. And again, just very, very consequential times. And I'll just close this out. I think Desi is her name that asked the question about hope and what to tell young people. Look, who you vote for determines who's elected. Yeah. Who's elected determines the policies. And the policies determine who lives, who dies, who survives, who thrives, period. So every election matters, and that certainly has been reiterated during these consequential times, from school committee to, if you have an elected one, to city council, to the mayor's office, to the corner office of the governor, secretaries of state, your federal electeds, every elected matters. And so policies determine everything. And who's elected determines the policies. Again, who lives, who dies, who survives, who thrives. And so what the Republicans are actively doing is what I would characterize as policy violence. And that is why I say policy is my love language. Because what I want to do while we're living in the present of legislated hurt and harm is prove that it is possible to legislate equity, to legislate healing, and to legislate justice.
Okay, one last quick thing and then we'll let you go, Congresswoman. You're very generous with your time. I don't know if you saw Joan Bernanke's column the other day, but based upon recent electoral results, here was the headline of her piece in the Globe, and I'd like you to answer her question. With women running the political show,
facts.
Is it over for men. So, I mean, that's a fairly straightforward
Not as long as they
question.
support us.
Fair enough.
No, it's not. I do want to say it is incredible, the sea change, the paradigm shift.
Sure is.
But bear in mind, when we say that the number of women, particularly in our Commonwealth, serving in these elected leadership and influential roles are unprecedented, that doesn't mean that we yet have parity.
Right.
It's unprecedented, but we still don't have leadership parity when it comes to gender and race. And I think it's also important to note that this sort of representation was decades in the making. This has nothing to do with waves or flukes or magic. None of us is here by way of magic. We're here because we're damn good.
On that note,
We want to thank Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley for taking our precious time
Thank you,
with us this evening. We
Congresswoman.
really appreciate it. We want to thank everybody who came down to the Boston Public Library
Thank
for the
you all
special
for
edition
coming.
for BPR After Hours show. We want to thank, of course, our crew.
wait, how about thanking these guys too one more time?
Absolutely. The Boston Arts Academy and their spirituals ensembles
Yes.
really
Yes.
were
Just spectacular.
incredible. And
Whoa.
Michael Bradley, their unbelievable, great director.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank
It
you
was
so much
terrific.
for being with us. And we want to thank our crew as well. Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer back in Brighton, John LeClaw Parker, our executive producer, Jamie Bologna, our staff here at the Boston Public Library, engineering and events team, Sai Patel, Evelyn Brito, Abby Blake, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Brad Lewis, Glenn Heath, and Annie Schreffler. Thank you, Jimmy. You did a very nice
Thank
job.
you. It's a great night. We really thank you
Thank you
for
all.
coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
I'm Marcia